Greetings, YouTube. It's your favorite Warlock Jay here, and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 fantasy anime for RPG ideas. As you may or may not know, let me lower the volume here. As you may or may not know, I am a huge fan of anime, and I'm a huge fan of role-playing games. So let's see if we could combine them together now, shall we? The first one on my list is Kaze no Stigma. The plot for Kaze no Stigma is essentially what happens if you combined Harry Potter with the Warriors. You know, Warriors, come out and play. Basically the main character was exiled from his clan for not knowing how to use fire magic, and but during his 3-year exile, I believe it was, he learns wind magic, and members of his clan start dropping like flies. So members of his clan believe that he's responsible for the killings, when but he isn't. At least that's how I remember it. So you could definitely see the Harry Potter houses where different houses know different forms of magic. The Warriors, you know, it takes place in a modern setting, much like Harry Potter, but everybody has their own thing, just like the gangs in the Warriors. Which, if you haven't seen it, great movie, by the way, just great movie. I don't know if you're in. I know my fan base is pretty limited. They sometimes have limited tastes. Let me put it that way. Go watch The Warriors. It's one of my favorite films. Kaze no Stigma, to my knowledge, is actually a role-playing game in Japan. Unfortunately, it's a Japanese-only translation, so I do not know if there's ever going to be an English translation anytime soon. But considering that game came out in 2006, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, I would definitely play a Kaze no Stigma game. Like, definitely. Number 2 is Record of Lodoss War. Record of Lodoss War. Well, I'm cheating here a little bit. So the basis of Record of Lodoss War was a series of. It was based off a series of novels by Ryo Mizuno, and the inspiration of those novels were taken from a Dungeons and Dragons game that him and his friends were playing at the time. He used his own setting called Phocelia, which was a genre, not genreless. It was a campaign setting that wasn't rule specific. So you could take Phocelia and drop it into any sort of fantasy setting, fantasy-based game. But he primarily used it for Dungeons and Dragons, from my knowledge. It even follows. The main characters are even human, fighter, wizard, thief, cleric, dwarf, elf. To my knowledge, there's not a halfling because I think they only had 6 players at the time, not including Mizuno, and I don't think they had the rights to use halfling in this show either, so that worked out in the end. To my knowledge, in the Japanese RPG Sword World, there's a specific setting for Phocelia. Or Phocelia, I believe it was. I know that it's a specific setting in Sword World, but there's not a Record of Lodoss tabletop RPG to my knowledge. So with the world of Record of Lodoss War, it's much more like your more epic fantasy. So this takes place after a giant war between the gods had just basically wrecked the world. And the heroes are trying to stop like this great evil from encroaching the land. You know, your typical high fantasy stuff. I saw the anime once when I was much younger. I highly, highly recommend it because it's just great. I personally love it. The one downside I could say to Record of Lodoss War is, they were so it was kind of based off the books verbatim, which was based off the games they played verbatim. So a lot of characters just drop out and just reappear out of nowhere like it's nothing, which is a little bit jarring. But once you get used to that, I think it's a pretty good anime. I highly recommend it. I was actually, funny story, listening to the opening while I was walking the dogs today, and I just got like hit with this nostalgia. I'm like, wow, I've gotten old. At the ripe old age of 24, I've gotten old. Excuse me. Number 3, Made in Abyss. Made in Abyss is about 2 adventurers traveling in this 9-layered abyss, as they call it, and there's different monsters. There's different hazards. There's even like the mental toll of dungeon crawling. This is a if there was an RPG to be made out of Made in Abyss, it would be a very dungeon crawl heavy game. It's very much like you're just going into the abyss for different things, but it's like this giant, in RPG terms, think of it like a giant mega dungeon. And imagine an anime that takes place during an entire anime that takes place in a mega dungeon. Think of it that way. I'm sorry, they're shooting fireworks out there again. I have to put another trigger warning in the title. But yeah, I've seen a couple of episodes of Made in Abyss. My sister, I believe, is up to date. Don't quote me on that. Pamela, if you're watching this, hi. Yeah, no, I highly recommend Made in Abyss from the few episodes I did end up seeing. I actually do want to make a mega dungeon inspired by Made in Abyss, where it's just a hole in the ground, and the players have to keep track of all their like mental attributes, as well as their their regular 6 attributes, because like it often goes into like the mental toll of dungeon crawling. Like, people who have gone into the abyss and have survived literally don't have the will to continue forward, nor do they want to go through all the trouble of going back up. So they're just literally stuck there. They form their own like towns and civilizations. It's a very interesting show. I highly recommend it. Number 4. I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this one. The Isekai anime. So like another world anime, basically Dot Hack Sign, Sword Art Online, Log Horizon, things like that. Basically, players log into an online MMO, usually fantasy based, although SAO did experiments with science fantasy at one point. But yeah, it's usually fantasy based. They all log in, usually the first time playing, and then they find out they can't log out, and that they're stuck in this game world. Now, if you die in the game world, you die in real life. So there's incentive for them to survive and escape the game. I believe Dot Hack was the progenesis of the modern isekai genre. I know that there's some anime that predate it, but if memory serves, the modern isekai starts at Dot Hack and then moves on with all the others that you see, like Sword Art Online, Log Horizon. I know that there's a Korean one, a Korean isekai. I can't remember what it was called, but yeah, things like that nature. So I guess how people would do that is that they would make a character that's being played by a character. Well, no, they would make a character who plays a character in the game. So essentially, each player would have 2 characters to keep track of. I think running an isekai game would be pretty fun. I have a couple of campaign ideas I want to run. I also have one-shot idea I do want to run, but the isekai game's kind of up there. I'm not gonna lie, I think it's pretty cool. Number 5 would be Rune Explorers. Rune Explorers was a OVA series from 1995, where the main character was the apprentice of a wizard, but her and the wizard kind of had a falling out, and so he placed a curse on her that whenever she casts magic, she turns into a mouse. And this was an actual anime. It was released in 1995. I'm not making it up. And it's kind of like it's kind of like Slayers. You know what? Let me put that in as well. Rune Explorer / Slayers. They're both like pretty goofy fun. Very dungeon crawl inspired. It doesn't take itself too seriously, especially Slayers. Let me put it to you this way: in World and Slayers, a woman's menstrual cycle influences her magical abilities. Yeah, that's a thing. I don't know if any of you remember Slayers. I know a lot of people in my generation might remember Slayers. But Rune Explorers, Slayers, I highly recommend them. Those are tied for number 5. And I actually believe that Rune Explorers was based off a dungeon crawl that the creator did with one of his friends. I don't know if it was Dungeons or Dragons or if it was Sword World. Probably leaning towards Dungeons and Dragons. And Slayers, I think, was I don't remember the exact inspiration for Slayers, but it's very D&D inspired. Like, watch it. It's pretty good. Anyways, that's my list of fantasy anime for RPGs. If anyone here if any of my viewers are well versed in Japanese role-playing games, or preferably both, could you tell me if Kaze no Stigma and Sword World have translations? I know that there was a fan translation of Sword World going on, and they were just releasing it on Wikia in slow bits. I'm not sure if they were hit with cease and desist or something. But yeah, that was a thing that happened. I highly recommend all the series that I listed here. Trigger warning with SAO though. In the second season, there's an attempted rape scene. So if you're squeamish like that, I highly recommend kind of like cutting out of that season. And actually in the third season too. You know what, just watch the first season of SAO. It's the best season. Highly recommend Dot Hack Sign. Listen, Dot Hack Sign is one of my personal favorite isekai. And yeah. Good evening and good gaming, everybody.